Hello to the Comics Show, the show where our topics of discussion are dictated by the Hollywood release schedule and where we are more or less just bombarding you with trivia collected from forum posts and blogs.
In today's episode, we're talking about everyone's lovable giant walking talking tree, Groot, the character that just by uttering I am Groot can make you laugh, gasp, and even cry.
But did you know that his vocabulary wasn't always as limited? When he first made his appearance in 1956 in Tales to Astonish number 13, written by Larry Lieber and drawn by Don Heck, Groot presented himself as the monarch of Planet X, coming to kidnap an entire red-blooded American village to experiment on its people. Not only that, but he even explained his plan in explicit detail. Years later, he meets Nick Fury's Howling Commandos, lending them his aid in fighting...
I don't know what, I just read Brian Cronin's column. I don't know the context for this shit.
The point is that in 2005, Kit Giffen was having Groot speak as any other character, if a bit melancholic. Then, in Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord, written by the same Kit Giffen, Groot returns to his 1950s verbose, grandiose speech patterns, only to suddenly start communicating solely in the I Am Groots a few months later under Andy Lanning and Dan Abnett.
Aren't comics weird?
Okay, that was the comedy portion of the video. No more funny business from now on.
Don't you get your jacket to my peanut butter.
Talking about weird comics, there's a whole genre about the kind of weirdness that's found in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I call it cosmic comics. And it's something different from space operas. I won't go into detail because I want to get to Mobius, but if it's got characters flying long distances through space without a spaceship, it might be a cosmic comic. If it's got space gods, especially Trimurti type three-headed gods, it might be a cosmic comic. If it's got characters achieving an elevated state of consciousness, gaining cosmic awareness, then it might be a cosmic comic. Accept my authority! Did you like that? I made a reference to a thing you recognize. In what follows, I'll present a few such comics. Jack Kirby is probably the grandpappy of the cosmic comic, and that's precisely what Tom Scioli and Joe Casey are getting at in Godland. There, they pay homage to Jack Kirby's comics, condensing and blending visual elements and characters found in series like Fantastic Four, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes, Jack Kirby made the comic out of Kubrick's masterpiece.
The New Gods, Black Panther, or The Eternals, over which they add elements of psychoanalysis and New Age mysticism. Adam Archer faces cosmic gods and alien invaders, but on the other hand, he butts heads with a sensationalistic press, an envious sister, and an untrustworthy government. The series is also made remarkable by having some humor. There's the contrast between monologues and logoreal narrations dotted with very flat replies, swearing, or very pop exclamations. There's the somewhat ridiculous treatment of psychedelic substances in the story, bringing into text a lot of the subtext of some mainstream cosmic comics. We don't call them trippy visuals for nothing. And there are some character designs, the most memorable being Tormentor's aides, which are pairs of anthropomorphic rats dressed as Clark Kent and Superman respectively. It's just weird and funny, you know? But more than anything, the star of the series is Tom Scioli and his art. Bold and strong, he treats Kirby as a genre, as an aesthetic, and exceeds mere homage by starting to carve his own expressions in that artistic space. An expression that has found even more personal, more idiosyncratic forms in later series, such as Satan Soldier or G.I. Joe vs. Transformers. Since the genre sprouts strongly from the work of Jack Kirby, with notable contributions from Ditko's Doctor Strange run and the Silver Age run of the Legion of Superheroes, it makes a lot of sense that a lot of cosmic comics are published by Marvel and DC, or at the very least, as is the case with Godland, are strongly indebted to such comics. At the same time, Kirby and Ditko were tapping into the culture of the 60s and 70s in ways not dissimilar to Kubrick's 2001 or to new wave sci-fi such as Samuel R. Delaney's Nova, Frank Herbert's Dune, Roger Zelanski's Lord of Light, or Michael Moorcock's The Dancers at the End of Time. There's more out there than just superhero comics, you know? And that's precisely what 12 Gem proves, that the cosmic comic isn't by its nature a superhero comic or a corporate comic. Lane Milburn's graphic novel is more a case of convergent evolution, parodying and celebrating the same space operas that inspired authors such as Starlin, Kirby, Engelhardt, and Claremont. It's using the same tropes, but arriving at them independently. It begins with Dr. Z choosing his team of rascals to recover 12 gems of power that we do not really know what they're doing. And it doesn't really matter. Probably it has something to do with the weird three-headed god on the cover. Or not. I don't know.
I did read the comic. I'm just appropriating his tone.
So we meet Dogstar, a flying dog that's also a space mechanic, Venus the Space Knight, dressed more like the princesses saved by Space Knights, and Furs, a man-pig bounty hunter. The retro style and fine hatchings emanate from a naive pleasure for mark-making, for leaving traces on the page, especially when applied excessively without necessarily wanting to shade or texture, rendering characters with poorly studied figures. It may not be to everyone's taste, but if the transgressional and humorous elements were those that attracted you to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and especially the hint of an underground sensibility that you want to see more of, you may be interested in this comic. Now, since I mentioned the new wave sci-fi people, I think it would be a good time to jump on the other side of the Atlantic for... Huh! Gotcha! You thought I was going to talk about 2000 AD? No! I was thinking more on the influence those guys, especially Michael Moorcock, had on the French guys from La Pilote and heavy metal, or more appropriately, Metal Hula. Guys like Philippe Drouet, for example. Lone Sloan is a masterpiece that may not need an introduction. The cosmic comic is a genre of shocks and a conglomeration of concepts. From this point of view, Drouet's work is the pinnacle of the genre. We have cosmic gods, organs-shaped spacecrafts, bridges between planets, interplanetary war, all drawn in crazy detail in exaggerated perspectives, put into pages of continuous space in which diegetic elements become gutters for other panels. It's crazy, it's insane. Things are moving very fast in Lone Sloan, and no matter how much attention the reader has, she remains behind, finding that the best strategy is to let go and just go with the flow. On the other hand, in order to reach this peak, certain things are lost. The stories themselves are more pretexts to show a particular building, a particular monster, a certain scene where Drouet psychedelically represents the expansion of a character's consciousness. And let's not even talk about characterization. Even the sequential storytelling takes a backseat when the engine for all of this is the shock that comes from really strong out there concepts drawn in a very striking way. The Lone Sloan series is the type of work that should exist, without which an artistic environment would have been so much poorer, but whose uniqueness is understandable. I think I'm good just with Lone Sloan, thank you very much. And to wrap this up, let's not forget about the constant flow back and forth between comics and cinema. I already mentioned Kirby's 2001. He also did designs for the fake equalization of Lord of Light. Bill Sienkiewicz drew an adaptation of Lynch's Dune even trippier than the film itself. And speaking of Dune, I promised you Mobius, didn't I? We all know that Jodorowsky worked on a Dune equalization. We knew that even before the hagiographic documentary Jodorowsky's Dune. At the time of pre-production, he surrounded himself with the best of Europe's fine artists, or what a really smart teenage boy would consider the best of the best, and became friends with Jean Mobius Girard. We know that Dan O'Bannon, Geiger and Girard continued to collaborate, working on Alien, and that Jodorowsky feels Hollywood stole from him. However, he also received the spot in the limelight by having his comics career jump-started using his close relationships to one of the best comics authors who ever lived. The Incal can be easily seen as an outgrowth of The Long Tomorrow, a 1975 short story written by Dan O'Bannon and drawn by Mobius. It has the same dirty future that in 75, before Blade Runner, Alien or Star Wars, was still a revelation, opposing the sterility of 2001, The Andromeda Strain or Star Trek. Both comics even start as farcical detective stories. Now, in the Incal, this premise is propelled through a sort of vision quest, an initiatic journey. The universe becomes much larger, getting populated with all sorts of concepts brought into discussion during the preparations for Dune, so that everything becomes strongly influenced by astrology, alchemy and tarot, more so than by any sci-fi author, Frank Herbert himself included. And thanks to Mobius' excellency in character design, figure drawing, perspective and sequential storytelling, everything remains solid and believable. And if often enough producing shattering images or reaching important points in the ritual described by Jodorowsky takes precedent over narrative coherence, precisely the dissonance between a sort of narrative indifference and an impeccably realized world filled with vibrant characters gives the work a dreamlike quality. All these comics are available, at least digitally, through Comixology, and I'd love for you to check them out. Thanks for watching. If you stayed up to this point, you probably liked what you saw and heard. So why not let the world know by hitting that like button? It's not that big of a deal. It's meh, it was okay. If you enjoyed it more than that, consider subscribing or at least sharing it with other people. It would do me lots of good by spreading the word out. And if you really appreciated what I'm doing, the show has a Patreon account where you can support me financially.